Magandang araw sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Elmer Navarro Manuel at ngayong Semana Santa, inimbitahan namin si Father Ari Sanchez para ibahagi ang kanyang kaalaman tungkol sa pagbabalik ng mga tradisyon ng Holy Week matapos ang 2 taon na hindi pagpapractice nito dahil sa COVID-19 pandemic. Aalamin din natin kay Father Aris ang mga preparasyon, health protocols at mga bagong balita ngayong Semana Santa. Magandang araw po, Father Aris.
Good morning, Elmer. That's Father Ari's season.
Season po, sorry. Oo nga, namali pa. Pero Father, ito po, since this is, I think, after 2 years po, ito yung Semana Santa na medyo maluwag, ano? Na...
Oo, actually 2 years na lockdown ang Holy Week. I still remember last year, may services kami sa loob ng simbahan, may konting tao, the ones who were serving, pero hindi open to the public.
So
I remember last year was very sad. Of course, 2 years ago was even worse.
Yes.
Pero kaya maraming tao masaya this year kasi alam mo naman ang Holy Week dito sa atin sa Pilipinas napakahalaga.
Opo. Ayun nga po, at ito nga, since ito dahil pandemic na rin, pero medyo maluwag na, so yung mga tao nagsisimula ng magsibalik sa mga simbahan, medyo natutuloy na nila yung mga panapanata nila, no? Ano po ba yung mga pwede nating matutunan mula sa buhay or mula sa passion hanggang sa muling pagkabuhay ni Kristo na pwede nating ihalin tulad ngayong nangyaring pandemic dito sa atin, Father?
Alam mo, magandang sundan yung mga reflections ni Pope Francis. Kasi ang lagi niyang sinasabi, to see our sufferings in life, and unite them, no? Unite them with the sufferings of the Lord. Halimbawa, these days, talagang affected si Pope Francis nung gera sa Ukraine. So, yun ang kanyang message nung Palm Sunday sa Vatican. Kasi first time din nila sa Vatican after 2 years na magkaroon ng Palm Sunday celebrations sa St. Peter's Square, no? So, yun ang kanyang mensahe na yung paghihirap, first of all, tayong lahat tinatawagan niya na magdasal, mag-alay ng sacrifices para sa mga taga-Ukraine. Tapos, yun nakikita niya na yung pagdurusa ng mga taong nandun ngayon, sabi niya, to unite them, no? To the sufferings of their Lord. Kapag ganon, parang lalo tayong mapapalapit sa ating Panginoon at nagkakaroon ng kahulugan. Yung mas nagiging makahulugan sa atin ngayon yung pagpapakasakit ng ating Panginoon.
Okay. Alright. Ito, Father Aris, papayagan na ba ulit yung mga traditional na pabasa at saka yung mga prosesyon ngayong Semana Santa, yung Station of the Cross po, papayagan na po ba ngayon yun?
Marami sa mga practices pinapayagan na. Alert level 1 na tayo eh. March 1 pa tayo nag-alert level 1, di ba? So, halos lahat relax na eh. Actually, allowed na ang 100% capacity sa simbahan. So marami sa mga practices allowed na, pero nandun pa rin yung paulit-ulit na reminders na distancing, hygiene, and of course yung mask. No? Dito sa aming parokya sa St. John Paul II sa Eastwood, hindi pa din kami nag 100%. Kasi isa sa mga natutunan ko dito sa 2 taon ng pandemic, mahalaga that people feel safe. No? So, ang hirap naman nun na sasabihin mag-distancing tapos 100%. Alam naman natin na yun for commercial reasons. No?
Yes.
So dito sa amin, sa parokya namin, dito sa St. John Paul II, 31% kami.
Okay.
31% ang seating capacity namin. So, ang normal seating capacity ay 400, 125 lang ang pinapapasok namin sa loob. Meron naman kaming tents and chairs sa labas.
Okay.
So, having said that, lagi lang yun ang iniisip sa lahat ng mga ginagawa. For example, nung Palm Sunday, daming tao.
Oo.
Ang daming tao kasi isa yan sa mga tradisyon na malalim sa mga Pilipino eh.
Okay.
So pinilin ko, sabi ko sa mga tao, huwag kayong gagalaw kasi mahilig sila yun, lumalapit sila sa pare.
Tama, nagko-converge po. Opo.
Oo. Kaya to maintain the distancing, sabi ko sa mga tao, huwag kayong gagalaw, dyan lang kayo sa lugar ninyo. Promise ko, lahat pupuntahan ko. So ako yung napagod.
Yeah.
Ako yung napagod. Umikot sa lahat ng sulok ng simbahan, pati sa labas, kahit na umaambon.
Ayan, oo nga. Kasi talagang, Father, alam nyo, pagka palaspas talaga, hindi mo talaga matatawaran yung dami ng tao na gustong pumasok sa simbahan para
Oo, actually,
magpa-bless.
nakita ko yung pictures ng yung mga posts sa Facebook sa Baclaran, sa Quiapo, sa Antipolo. Alam ko yung mga lugar na yun eh. Medyo napapailing ako pag nakikita ko yung mga gano'n na dikit-dikit. No? So yun ang isa sa mga reminder sa amin ng local government. Reminder din ng CBCP na sa lahat ng gagawin to try our best to maintain all the protocols. No? So for example, isa pang activity na dinudumog ng maraming tao, yung bisita iglesia sa Holy Thursday. Holy Thursday ng gabi. So kami dito sa John Paul II, inayos namin yung simbahan in such a way na maayos yung flow. So marami kaming ushers, marami kaming mga security personnel sa labas just to make sure na ma-maintain natin, maayos natin lahat yun.
Alright. Father Aris, naghahanap pa po ba kayo ng mga vaccination cards sa mga papasok sa simbahan?
Required yun eh. Required ng LGU. No? And since the very beginning, sinusunod namin lahat ng mga protocols na yan. So, yun na lang actually ang naiwan eh. Yun na lang ang naiwan. Wala ng contact tracing.
Yes, oo.
No? Pero, para pumasok, kailangan ng vaccination cards.
Alright.
Pero lang dun sa mga bata.
Ayan.
Yung mga bata, basta kasama sila ng mga magulang nila at yung mga magulang vaccinated, pwede nang pumasok yung mga bata.
Oo nga, at medyo talagang maraming pamilyang Pilipino ang sabik na pumasok ulit sa simbahan dahil talagang natenga sila ng halos 2 taon sa bahay.
Actually kami nagka-campaign din kami na bumalik na sa simbahan, no? Kasi marami hanggang ngayon nasa online mass pa din.
Tama, oo.
Sa totoo lang, yung online mass para yon nung panahon na lockdown tayo. Yung hindi ka pwede talagang lumabas, hindi ka pwedeng magsimba. Pero ngayon, na alert level 1 na tayo, pagkatapos lumalabas na, nagtatrabaho na, nagmo-mall na, kumakain na sa labas, dapat naman nagsisimba na din.
Tama.
Nagsisimba ng face-to-face.
Ayan. Alright, Father, since ito, napag-uusapan natin, no, kanina sabi nyo, yung mga bata, pwede na pumasok sa simbahan. Itong tinatawag nilang Generation Z, o itong mga millennials na to, medyo hindi na sila updated tungkol dun sa mga tradisyon na ginagawa ng mga Pinoy na Katoliko tuwing Holy Week. Paano nyo po ito bibigyan ng impormasyon yung mga kabataan ngayon kung ano ba talaga ang sinasagawang tradisyon kapag Holy Week dito sa Pilipinas at ano po yung mga pwedeng aral na mapulot ng mga ito.
Mukhang ang isang characteristic ng mga kabataan ngayon, hindi basta-basta sumusunod sa practices.
Yan.
Kumbaga, kung dati, dahil yun ang ginagawa ng mga magulang, o halimbawa, yun ang sinasabi ng mga magulang, susunod na. Ngayon, ako ang experience ko, ang mga kabataan, they look for meaning. Gusto nilang maintindihan kung bakit ginagawa yun. So, and ang isang malaking influence sa kabataan ngayon is social media.
Tama.
So, ako, very active ako sa social media to give suggestions, no? To give suggestions, to give ideas, to explain things, to make them think. Hopefully, sa pamamagitan ng itong mga to, mahatak sila na magpunta sa simbahan, mahatak sila na magdasal. They have different ways. They have different ways of expressing their faith. Many times, not very much the traditional ways.
Opo.
Pero, ang bilid ko lagi, huwag natin sila mamalitin. Kasi iba man yung kanilang pamamaraan, kailangan nating pasukin yung mundong yun eh.
Yes,
kailangan nating maunawaan yun. Alam mo, isa sa magandang projects ni Pope Francis ngayong Holy Week 2022, may tradition kasi sa Vatican na pag Good Friday, nag-i-stations of the cross sila sa Coliseum, no? And ang susulat ng mga meditations, ng mga reflections this year, families.
Tama.
So isipin mo, hindi mga obispo, hindi mga pare, hindi mga theologians, pero ang susulat ng reflections ng Stations of the Cross, families. No? Isa yan sa mga hinihintay ko sa Good Friday. Gusto kong marinig ano ang ipinagdadasal ng mga pamilya ngayon. Gusto kong marinig ano yung malalalim na panalangin, ano yung mga hinaing ng iba't ibang miyembro ng ng pamilya ngayon, ng nanay, ng tatay, ng lolo, ng lola, at ng mga kabataan din. Very, parang, I think that will be very, very meaningful.
Yes. No? Kasi parang ang ginawa ni Pope Francis talagang inilapit niya sa pinaka-basic community sa lahat, yung family. So
sa
talagang
basic unit ng society.
Tama.
No? Ang ganda nun, parang I think the past years meron namang ang effort nila yung reflections naman ng mga nagka-COVID.
Opo, tama po.
So again, isa pa 'yon. Isa pa yung very meaningful na effort. No?
Yes.
Kasi dito natin makikita yung koneksyon ng pananampalataya natin dun sa nararamdaman natin na nararanasan natin ngayon.
Opo. Alright, ito since Father Aris, napag-usapan na rin or nabanggit nyo kanina na mag-i-Station of the Cross, meron akong tanong dito. Pwede ko po bang i-clarify sa inyo, ilang beses po ba talaga bumagsak si Jesus Christ nung karga-karga niya yung cross papuntang Kalbaryo?
Alam mo, ang sagot ko sa mga ganyang tanong nung panahon na yun, wala namang nag-video doon.
Namang nagbilang,
Walang nag-document nung mga yun. So, ang pinaka-basis lang natin yung traditional
Yes,
Stations of the Cross. Kasi nagsimula yun noong pa nung mga unang panahon pa pag nagpunta ka ngayon sa Jerusalem, makikita, isa sa mga practices na ginagawa ng mga pilgrims yung mag-Stations of the Cross dun sa daan na tinatawag na Via Dolorosa.
Ayan, oo.
Okay? Yun ay palengke. No? At marami sa mga bagay-bagay na nandoon nung panahon ng pagpapakasakit ng ating Panginoon, nandun pa din hanggang ngayon. No? So, makikita mo, mararamdaman mo kung ano yung mismong nangyari sa ating Panginoon. So again, to answer your question, traditionally, he fell 3 times.
Yes.
No? Pero kung i-imagine natin yung hirap na inabot ng ating Panginoon, yung bigat ng krus na pinasan niya, hindi ako magtataka kung mas maraming beses pa siya nadapa. No? Kasi ang punto naman doon, hindi naman kung ilang beses na nadapa. Ang sinasabi sa atin doon sa bawat pagkadapa natin, matuto tayong tumayo.
Yes.
Tumayong muli.
Parang kasi, kahit na meron siyang, syempre, yung crown of thorns, tapos hinahampas pa siya sa likod, habang karga niya yung talagang tama ho kayo, hindi lang siguro 3 beses bumagsak yun, dahil napakabigat talaga ng krus na yun. Pero yun nga po, tama rin po na ang mahalaga po yung muling pagbangon sa pagkakadapa.
Yung ibig sabihin.
Yes.
Yung ibig sabihin, kasi alam mo, nung early centuries ng Christianity, isa sa mga ginawa ng mga Kristiyano, sundan yung daan na yun. Yung daan na tinahak ng ating Panginoon. Pagkatapos, to promote the devotion, ang ginawa ng mga Franciscans na silang mga custodians ng sacred sites sa Jerusalem, sila yung nagpauso na magkaroon sa mga simbahan ng Stations of the Cross, no? Para kahit hindi tayo makapunta sa Jerusalem, makapagnilay tayo. No? Halimbawa, ngayong panahon ng Kwaresma, tradition yan na every Friday nag-Stations of the Cross. No? Pero I remember as a young seminarian, si Cardinal Sin, araw-araw nag-Stations of the Cross. And believe ako, he knows it by memory. No? Alam mo, nung seminarista pa ako, I had the privilege of being one of the servers of Cardinal Sin. So, madalas nakakasabay ako. So, pagsakay niyan sa kotse, magro-rosaryo yan, 50 mysteries. Pagkatapos doon, mag-i-Stations of the Cross, tapos maglilitany. Lahat yan from memory. Believe ako. I was really so impressed and edified by the late Jaime Cardinal Sin, Archbishop of Manila.
Talagang dahil nga since yun ang tradisyon talaga na nakamulatan ni Cardinal
Sin. Maganda magandang practice yun na very often dinadasal natin, nagninilay tayo para nakikita natin kung ano ang ginawa ng ating Panginoon para sa atin. Hindi lamang pag Holy Week, hindi lamang pag Kwaresma, pero magandang paalala yun araw-araw.
Opo. Alright. Okay po, Father Ari Season, maraming salamat po sa oras na ibinigay niyo sa amin. At maraming salamat sa paglilinaw niyo sa aming mga katanungan. Mag-iingat po kayo palagi. And alright, ayan po si Father Ari Season na ating nakapanayam ngayon. Ako po muli si Elmer Navarro Manuel reporting for Tribune News on Q.
Kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, boses natin sa Kongreso. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, basic good. Atin to, pagkaisa ng marinig ang mga hinaing. Young and active leaders sa Kongreso, ang boses natin. Tandaan at iboto, balota 108. To build and realize the projects we dreamed of. PG Party List, vote 108 na. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, boses natin sa Kongreso. PG Party List, kasangga mo, balot 108 iboto. PG Party List, basic good. Atin to, PG Party List, atin to.
Fun and inspiring na kwentuhan? Sagot na yan ang programang Spotlight ng Daily Tribune. Makipagkwentuhan at kilalanin ng iba't ibang personalidad na kilala sa kani-kanilang larangan. Manood at makinig sa mga inspiring stories na kanilang ibabahagi kasama si Nina Ventura at Jojo Silvestre. Be ready na mamangha at matuwa every Thursday alas 2 ng hapon dito lang sa Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now on YouTube.
If I think that you should die, you will die. I'd be happy to slaughter him. Until the last pusher and the last drug lord are... I will never allow any military man or police to go to jail unjustly for performing his duties.
Rodrigo Duterte, the 16th Philippine president, is turning 77 today. It's his last birthday while in office. Nicknamed Digong, he was born in 1945 into a family closely tied to local politics. His father was once a provincial governor, while his mother worked as a public school teacher. The younger Duterte trained as a lawyer and rose to become a state prosecutor. He entered politics when he was appointed officer in charge, vice mayor of Davao City by President Corazon Aquino after the 1986 People Power Revolution that toppled the Marcos dictatorship. Since then, he ran as mayor of Davao, for which he was elected for almost 2 decades. Under his mayoral stint, he gained a reputation for making Davao City one of the safest in the Philippines by fighting criminality and corruption. In 2015, he was prodded by his supporters to pursue the presidency. When he accepted the challenge and embarked on a presidential campaign, he made headlines over some of his remarks, including his promise of killing criminals and eradicating the illegal drug trade in 3 to 6 months.
I will get rid of drugs, suppress crime, stop corruption in government in a matter of 3 to 6 months.
He even said in a televised debate that he would kill his own children if they took drugs.
Kaaway mong illegal na droga, anong gagawin nyo sakaling malaman po ninyo na isa sa mga anak nyo ay gumagamit ng illegal na droga?
Patayin mo.
May anak po ba kayong nalulong o gumamit ng illegal na droga?
Everything is okay. Everybody is okay, sir. My order is, even if it is a man, kill him. Kill him.
Despite criticism, he became more popular. He successfully painted a strongman image, a candidate who will do what is necessary to get things done. He slammed the erosion of faith and trust in government and rode on a populist wave by promising real change and transparency to the country of more than 110 million people. And his promise of replicating Davao City's anti-crime efforts on a national level catapulted him to the presidency. On May 30, 2016, the 16th Congress of the Philippines proclaimed Duterte as president-elect after topping the official count with over 16.6 million votes, 6.6 million more than his closest rival, Mar Rojas. He assumed office on June 30, 2016. At the age of 71, he was the oldest Filipino and first Mindanaoan ever elected to the presidency and the first local chief executive to get elected straight to the office of the president.
Rodrigo Roa Duterte,
do solemnly swear
no leader, however strong, can succeed at anything of national importance or significance unless he has the support and cooperation of the people he is tasked to lead and sworn to serve.
Love him or hate him, but he will likely be remembered for his tough on-crime agenda and drug war, ambitious infrastructure program, pandemic response, and his no-nonsense, colorful language that amused his supporters and enraged his critics.
To keep our essential health services and our food supply chain running, boosting the economy activity and ensure peace and order in our communities.
While seeking to eradicate criminality, Duterte accelerated the government's annual infrastructure expenditure through his Build, Build, Build program, which was heavily financed by borrowings. The program aims to usher in the golden age of infrastructure in the Philippines, anchored on the belief that investments on infrastructure are needed to bolster economic development. It also aims to reduce poverty, encourage economic growth, and reduce congestion in Metro Manila. At the start of his term, he identified 119 flagship projects under the Build, Build, Build program, but 6 years later, he only completed 18 projects on the list. The completed projects include the Sangley Point International Airport, as well as the airports in Clark, General Santos, and the new Clark City. He also completed the road network that cuts travel time from Bonifacio Global City to Ortigas from 40 minutes to just 12. On the other hand, among the unfinished projects include a 4-kilometer bridge that will supposedly connect the tropical Samal Island to his hometown Davao City. The pandemic was to blame for the setback, as the delivery of the machines needed for the projects had been hampered by border restrictions. But on the brighter side, the president's 18 legacy projects that had been completed did not yet include some 30,000 kilometers of roads and 6,000 bridges that were either built or rehabilitated under his administration. Nearly 6 years after he assumed the presidency, the government built the NLEX Harbor Link segment, Cavite-Laguna Expressway, Tarlac-Pangasinan-La Union Expressway, Taytay El Nido Road in Palawan, among others. Across the archipelago, about 11,400 flood control projects, 230 evacuation centers, and hundreds of COVID-19 facilities were also built under the Duterte administration. Seaports are also upgraded and rehabilitated, while more than 450 commercial and tourism seaport projects have been completed. He also launched the country's first land port, now known as the Parañaque Integrated Terminal Exchange, or the PITX. To his credit, the projects made provinces and cities more connected, and the delivery of goods and services are faster and more convenient. Infrastructure spending only comprised 3% of the country's gross domestic product when his term started. To his credit, Duterte raised it to 5.3% of the nation's GDP in 2021 and to an expected 5.8% of GDP by the end of 2022. Before the coronavirus pandemic struck the Philippines, the nation's economy was doing well. GDP averaged 6.5% from the time President Duterte came into office. The unemployment rate continued its long-run decline. The poverty rate also remarkably went down from 2015 to 2018. Observers say this could be attributed to Duterte's, of course, increased infrastructure spending, as well as progressive measures that spurred economic growth. Under his term, the Congress, dominated by his allies, approved key measures such as the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Law, Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, Ease of Doing Business and Efficient Government Service Delivery Act, Foreign Investment Act, Price Tarification Law. The reforms he and his economic managers had introduced were seen as crucial in attracting investors whose businesses are expected to generate more jobs for Filipino families. To aid the poor, Duterte also championed social policy reforms. Under his administration, the Universal Healthcare Act, Free Quality Tertiary Education Act, Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program Law, Free Irrigation Law, and Free Wi-Fi Access in Public Spaces Act have been approved. Halfway into Duterte's presidency in 2019, the Philippines was one of the fastest growing economies in the world. The Philippines was touted as the next Asian tiger economy, finally shedding its sick man of Asia reputation obtained during the economic collapse towards the end of the Ferdinand Marcos regime in the mid-1980s. But the pandemic upended all of Duterte's gains. The first COVID-19 case was detected in the country in early 2020. Last year, at a time when COVID-19 vaccines were gaining ground, the Philippines appeared to be on the right track in terms of economic rebound. The Philippines in 2021 posted a 5.6% growth, exceeding the government's target of 5%. President Duterte is hoping that as more Filipinos receive anti-coronavirus shots and with a further reopening of the economy, recovery is in sight.
Mamili kayo. Magpabakuna kayo o ipakulong ko kayo sa silda.
Of all the issues he had faced, the greatest challenge he may have confronted as Philippine president is an invisible enemy, the coronavirus disease. It proved to be a serious dilemma on balancing health and economic concerns, for the government had to decide whether a logical choice is to reopen the economy or close it to prevent spread of infection. It also magnified the country's ill-equipped medical health services, particularly challenged by lack of manpower who could accommodate patients during infection surges. Now around 67 million Filipinos have been fully vaccinated, still 3 million short from the government's target of 70 million by the end of the month, but still far from the 90 million goal by June. At present, the government is intensifying its efforts to meet its vaccination targets and protect more people from severe COVID-19 infection.
I appeal to all our kababayans to cooperate and do their part to help overcome this pandemic. The government cannot do this alone, and we need your active participation by getting vaccinated and strictly following the minimum health standards.
Even before the pandemic hit the country, Duterte is no stranger to natural calamities or man-made disasters, albeit on a smaller scale. On top of typhoons, the commander-in-chief in 2017 dealt with the 5-month-long armed conflict in Marawi City in Lanao del Sur, now considered the longest urban battle in the modern history of the country. Maute Group, an extremist alliance allied with ISIS, launched a takeover of Marawi in May 2017, taking government troops by surprise. The Philippine military waged ground assaults and airstrikes to defeat them, leaving a trail of destruction in the city, known for its rich cultural and architectural heritage. The government made significant progress in the rehabilitation of Marawi, though many residents are still grappling with poverty. A lawyer, former prosecutor, and longtime mayor, Duterte built an entire election campaign on an anti-crime agenda. Since Duterte assumed office in 2016, authorities conducted over 226,000 anti-narcotics operations, seized an estimated 75.35 billion peso worth of illegal drugs, arrested 14,000 high-profile targets, and dismantled about 1,026 dens and clandestine laboratories based on government data. At least 6,000 suspected drug peddlers have been killed by the police in what they called legitimate sting operations after suspects purportedly resisted arrest. Despite international pressure, Duterte continued with his crusade against illegal drugs. He even increased the salaries of soldiers and policemen and appointed them in civilian posts. He also signed into law the landmark Bangsamoro Organic Law, the culmination of the peace deal signed between the Moro Islamic Liberation Front and Duterte's predecessors, which was perceived to pave the way for lasting peace in Mindanao. To fight corruption, Duterte also formed the Presidential Anti-Corruption Commission and created task forces to probe agencies, particularly the Bureau of Customs and the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation. In various instances, however, he admitted fatigue as illegal drugs, communist insurgency, and corruption in the government remained.
Maituturing na isang matagumpay at produktibo ang 5-day official visit ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte sa China. Isa sa pinaka-naging sentro dito ay ang bilateral meeting nila ni Chinese President Xi Jinping.
Also among the issues that hounded the Duterte administration include his handling of the West Philippine Sea issue. In the past 6 years, China retained its aggressive posture in the highly contested waters, having various incursions into Philippine territory that prompted the government to fire off diplomatic protests. Duterte tiptoed in the issue as he repeatedly said that the country could not risk having trouble with China. Instead, he sought cordial ties with Beijing for foreign investments and loans. His moves were anchored on his independent foreign policy, the belief that the nation should be a friend to all and enemy to none. Duterte will go down in history as the most popular post-Marcos president. Compared to his three predecessors, the first Mindanaoan chief executive has kept his approval ratings above 70% based on Pulse Asia surveys, and his net satisfaction ratings not lower than positive 45, which counts as good. He is leaving Malacanang with a towering feeling.
Pagdating ng Sunday at 7 p.m., Speak Your Mind with our I Speak program na sasagot sa mga tanong regarding the latest and relevant issues sa paligid natin. I-like at i-follow nyo ang Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now on YouTube para updated ka sa mga latest episode namin mga katribu.
Please introduce yourself. I'm Pocholo Concepcion. I'm one of the editors of Daily Tribune as well as the head of its website.
My name is Nick Chionco, Assistant Sports Editor, Daily Tribune.
Francine Marquez, Lifestyle Associate Editor ng Daily Tribune at saka Spaces Editor.
So can you please describe the presidential candidate assigned to you?
The title of my story was, Can Leni Robredo pull off another upset?
The presidential candidate assigned to me is Senator Manny Pacquiao, who I've known since the mid-1990s.
Ang pinag-aralan ko at saka yung sinulat ko ay si Mayor Isko Dumagoso Moreno.
Because that's exactly the situation now as it was before in 2016. If you recall, Robredo ran for vice president in 2016 and won by a slim margin. At nagprotesta pa nga si Bongbong Marcos. And after 5 years, the Supreme Court decided that indeed Robredo won.
While I was still with a different paper, I used to cover the boxing beat, and I first saw him at the L&N gym in Sampaloc. That was 95, 96, and then I began covering him shortly after. I was at many of his fights, including all 30 plus in the US and then several others outside the Philippines.
Wala na siguro sa mga kandidato na mas magiging malapelikula pa ang buhay kung di ang buhay niya. Biruin mo, laking hirap talaga, as in talagang nandun squatters area. Tapos, nung teenager siya, na-discover siya ng isang talent agent sa Lamayan, sa Tondo. At pagkatapos nun, tuloy-tuloy na, dahil maganda nga itsura ni Yorme, naging artista siya. At syempre, naging sikat mula sa That's Entertainment, naging mentor niya si Herman Moreno. At syempre, dahil nga sa maganda itsura niya at may talent naman na ibubuga, tumuloy-tuloy na maging isa siya sa mga sikat na artista ng kapanahunan niya. Pero, may pangarap to si Yorme.
Below, mababa yung ratings na, and then she slowly worked her way up until ang maglalaban ngayon for the presidency on May 9 is Robredo against Bongbong Marcos. So, it's a rematch. Kung normal times tayo, siya yung number 1 sa survey. Bakit ko sinabi yon? Kasi abnormal times, pinuputakti siya ng fake news. Ang dami-daming bashers na umaatake sa kanya at nasa baba na naman siya ng ratings. When in fact, Leni Robredo is the most qualified candidate against all her opponents. Why? Because she's an economist and she's a lawyer. Nag-law pa siya.
Well, even before he tried his luck in politics, I already knew that he would someday enter the world of politics because one time at the gym, just before he began training, he went inside, he barged into the room and he started making speeches as if he's a political candidate. Back then, I knew that he was training his sights on politics, but I never knew that he would one day vie for the presidency. Manny Pacquiao may not be educated, but he's still street smart and he knows what the people wants. Considering that he grew up dirt poor, he had nothing, so he had to box just to make both ends meet.
Nagsikap din siya na mag-aral. Biruin mo, nakapag-aral siya ng public administration sa PLM. Pagkatapos noon, hindi pa rin natapos. Tumuloy-tuloy pa rin siya mag-aral hanggang sa makaabot rin siya makapag-aral abroad. Nag-take up siya ng leadership programs sa Boston University at saka sa Harvard. Sinong akalain na isang taong galing sa isang mahirap na beginnings ay makakaabot ng ganon. At higit sa lahat, nagsilbi siya sa Manila bilang una konsehal, pagkatapos vice mayor, tapos ngayon naman siya na ang mayor of Manila. Kasi mayroon tayong stereotypes about artistas, di ba? Pero si Mayor Isko Moreno, para sa akin, proved them wrong. Dahil unang sabak pa lang niya sa pagiging mayor, naipakita na agad yung bilis niya, yung kanyang motto na bilis aksyon. Isa siguro sa legacy niya rin yung maraming mga infrastructures na napagawa niya. Katulad ng mga bagong ospital, mga tulay. Ngayon, siguro sa pagtakbo niya to, hopefully, ma-replicate niya yung ginawa niya sa Manila sa buong bansa.
Now, ang storya, so nanalo siyang vice president, of course. Ayaw niya nang tumakbo for president kung siya lang ang masusunod. Kaya lang, malakas ang clamor ng mga tao para tumakbo siya. So, pero bago nangyari yun, again, if you will recall, news reports, she made an effort to forge a united opposition, meaning yung mga tumatakbo ngayong presidente, si Lacson, si Isko Moreno, at si Pacquiao. gusto niya ma-unite against Bongbong Marcos. Kaya lang hindi natuloy yun kasi for some reason, hindi natuloy yung isang crucial meeting nila. So again, she decided, sige, tatakbo na ako. Why? Why will she run? Because, ang sabi niya sa mga anak niya, yung nasimulan ng asawa niya, si Jessie Robredo, ay sayang kasi Jessie Robredo, by the way, could have been president kung hindi siya namatay. So anyway, she's very conscious of the fact that Bongbong Marcos, if Bongbong Marcos wins, magbabalik yung dating sistema ng politika.
And even in his limited time as a politician, congressman for one term and a senator, I think he was able to get a good grasp of what needs to be done to address the problems of the country. The problem is, many people are seeing him as some sort of being a nuisance candidate because of his lack of educational background. Although he was able to take up short courses, and people are belittling him or criticizing him for not having enough educational background to help him run the country.
Dahil sa mga matitinding naganap sa bansa natin nitong mga nakaraang taon, isa na dyan yung impact ng global pandemic sa atin. So, ang kailangan natin na susunod na presidente, yung may malinaw na aksyon at plano para sa bansa, sa healing and recovery natin. Hindi natin siguro kailangan ng isang presidente na ngayon pa lang mailap na sa media. Umiiwas sa media, paano na lang ang impormasyon na gusto natin? Si Mary Scott, right from the start, ginamit niya talaga yung social media para malaman kung anong ginagawa niya. Hindi lang siguro para magpapogi. Kahit sa gabi, makikita mo, tumutulong siya din sa mga anti-drug programs ng syudad, pati yung mga projects na ginagawa niya, kitang-kita natin. So, meron talagang clarity dun sa ginagawa niya.
So, she filed her candidacy, tumatakbo na siya ngayon. Now, ang sitwasyon ngayon is, it looks like, on the ground, mananalo siya. Kaya lang, ang problema niya yung survey. Mababa pa rin siya sa, number 2 siya sa survey, pero napakalaki lang ng lamang ni Bongbong Marcos. So, yun ang sitwasyon.
Sa ating mga botante, para sa akin, huwag na nating ulit hayaang laslasin at mayurakan yung ating karapatan at demokrasya bilang mga Pilipino. Umayos tayo sa pagboboto natin. Alamin natin ng mabuti kung ano ba yung pulso ng bayan.
So, in essence, the story that I wrote is asking, can she pull off an upset? Malalaman natin yan sa May 9 elections. Kaya ang reminder ko sa inyo, sa lahat ng Pilipino, pag-aralan ang bawat kandidato, most especially the President. Ang pulso ng bayan, ang aming ire-report sa inyo ng Daily Tribune. And I want to say this is perhaps the most crucial elections that we will have.
Please introduce yourself.
Ako si Roy Pelovelio, isa sa mga writer at photojournalist ng pahayagang Daily Tribune.
Hi, I'm Aldrin Cardona, Managing Editor of the Daily Tribune.
I'm Sandy Locos.
So, can you please describe the presidential candidate assigned to you?
Naatasan akong sumulat ng profile ni presidential aspirant at former Senator Bongbong Marcos.
I will talk about one person who is among the top 6 presidential aspirants. Sino nga ba si Calyodi de Guzman?
I am assigned to cover the presidential campaign of Senator Panfilo Lacson.
Sa artikulong aking ginawa, pinilit nating ipakita sa ating mga katribo na magbigay ng sulyap sa personalidad, pagkatao ng kandidatong si Bongbong Marcos. Sa ating pagsusulat, isa sa mga tinatry nating ipakita sa kanya kung paano siya naging consistent sa kanyang pagnanais na magkaroon ng isang nagkakaisang bansa dahil sa kanyang mata matagal nang laging sinasabi ukol sa nation building simula pa ng personal kong makita ito at maobserbahan nung panahong siya ay isang senador pa lamang.
Si Calyodi ay isa sa mga taong maaaring nakakasalubong ninyo sa kalsada. Maaaring siya ay iyong kasama sa opisina, maaaring siya ay iyong guro, isang nurse, doktor, o simpleng peon sa isang construction site. Kaya si Calyodi ay nagre-representa sa mga manggagawa. Kaya 'di ba, ang slogan niya, manggagawa naman.
Si Senator Ping Lacson ay kilala sa Senado bilang watchdog of the national budget. So nakuha niya yung nickname na yon because he is one of the senators na talagang tinitingnan niyang mabuti yung national budget for pork barrel insertions. So kilala rin siya bilang isa sa mga piling senador na hindi tumanggap ng pork barrel buong term niya.
Kasama na rin dito sa ating sinulat kung papaano siya makipagrelasyon at sumagot o ayusin ang conflict sa pagitan ng ilang mga nagbabangga ang interest at prinsipyo. Ganun na rin kung paano siya makitungo sa kanya mga subordinates.
Calyodi de Guzman is the first openly left presidential aspirant. Ang sinusulong niya ay sosyalismo. Ang sosyalismo noon ay tabu. Hindi mo maaaring openly sabihin na ako ay isang sosyalista, lalo na ako ay isang komunista. Pero nagbabago ang panahon. Tanggap na ng tao na ang sosyalismo ay maaaring isang magandang alternatibo sa kasalukuyang estado ng mga gobyerno.
Nagsilbi siya bilang pulis noong 1980s to 1990s na doon nga siya sumikat bilang isa sa mga police officer na nag-solve ng high-profile crimes at high-profile kidnapping cases. Naging rin siyang Philippine National Police Chief kung saan nakilala naman siya bilang ang leader ng PNP na nagtanggal ng cotton cup system sa pulisya. Dati na siyang sumubok bilang presidential candidate noong 2004, ngunit natalo siya kay dating Pangulong Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. This time, sumusubok ulit siya bilang presidential candidate kasama naman si Senate President Vicente Tito Sotto III. Ang kanilang plataforma ay umiikot sa anti-corruption, anti-crime, at itong tinatawag nilang budget reform.
Sa ating pagmamasid, ang napansin natin ay ang pagnanais niya na igalang yung personalidad ng kanyang mga subordinate kahit mas mababa sa kanya dahil ang isang striking thing na hindi natin malilimutan ay ang hindi nagpapahayag ng kanyang dissatisfaction sa kanyang mga subordinates. Ang madalas niyang gawin, kung may hindi siya nagustuhan, tatawagin sa kanyang opisina at doon sila mag-uusap.
Dahil sa sosyalismo, ang mga serbisyo katulad ng para sa health, sa education, ay libre. At yon ay isa sa mga isinusulong ni Calyodi de Guzman. Siya ay isang simpleng manggagawa. Graduate siya ng Customs Administration. Hindi siya katulad ng mga ibang kandidato na abogado, matataas ang pinag-aralan. Although hindi lahat sa kanila ay ganon. So, walang itinatago si Calyodi. Simpleng tao, simpleng leader. At yan ay isa sa mga dapat nating tingnan sa bawat isa sa mga kandidato.
So, instead na yung usual na paggawa ng budget kung saan naglalagay ng ceiling sa mga national government agencies para sa pagbuo ng kanilang annual budget, ang gusto ng Lacson Sotto tandem ay baguhin yun. Maging zero-based system yung pagbuo ng national budget at magkaroon ng role ang local government units sa pagbuo nito. Kung mananalo, sinasabi ni Lacson at syempre ni Sotto din na magkakaroon ng disiplinadong Pilipinas sa ilalim ng kanilang leadership. So, nangangako naman sila na hindi magiging police state ang Pilipinas under their leadership, pero gusto nilang magkaroon ng maayos at disiplinadong bansa at Pilipino para na rin sa ikauunlad ng ating pamumuhay.
Sana sa maiksing artikulong ito, nagawa nating mabigyan ng ating mga katribo ng karagdagang basihan kung papaano nila i-evaluate ang mga aspirante sa pagkapangulo sa halalang May 2022 upang magkaroon sila ng malaya at matalinong pagdidesisyon pagdating ng halalan upang tunay na makamtan ang pulso ng bayan.
At kayo ay merong kapangyarihan para ihalal sino man sa mga kandidato. Actually, mga 10 yata sila. Ang tunay na pulso ng bayan ay kayo. Yung pili mo ay sagrado. Yung pili mo ang dapat na masunod. Dahil ikaw ay Pilipino, karapatan mong piliin kung sino ang mamumuno sa Pilipinas at para sa mga Pilipino.
May kapangyarihan tayo mga katribo sa May 9, 2022 upang piliin kung sino ba ang susunod na magiging leader ng ating bansa. Kaya naman kilalaning mabuti ang mga kandidato, vote wisely at pakinggan ang pulso ng bayan.
mga impormasyong direktang makukuha mula sa sources at diretsahang usapan. Yan ang ating daming sa inyo sa programang Straight Talk. Samahan nyo kami sa makabuluhang talakayan live tuwing Martes alas 10 ng umaga sa official Facebook page ng Daily Tribune at Tribune Now on YouTube.
The first and the fifth, possibly the last, presidential spokesperson of President Rodrigo Duterte, Communications Secretary Martin Andanar, answers questions about his role in the final months of the administration, as well as its accomplishments in the past 6 years. Watch Andanar talk about what he calls the last mile of President Duterte. Here on Straight Talk.
Good morning. The Philippines is facing a leadership transition amid global uncertainties. Candidates are barnstorming from north to south, feverishly pitching their platforms and how they shall fill in the very big shoes that the Duterte administration will leave behind. Today, we invited one of the most low-key cabinet members who, whether he admits it or not, is for the large part instrumental as to why the president enjoys high trust and approval ratings even towards the end of his presidency. PCOO Secretary and Presidential Spokesperson Martin Andanar, welcome to the special edition of Straight Talk. I'm your host for today, Bettina Fernandez.
Good morning, Chingbi.
Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Salamat at tayo'y na-invite muli dito.
Our pleasure. Thank you for coming. Let's go to our questions. You have come full circle. You remain in the President's cabinet. So it's very rare that a Press Secretary, a PCOO Secretary stays in the job until the end of the presidency. What's the secret, Mr. Secretary?
Parang mahirap sagutin yon, pero susubukan kong sagutin. Siguro it is because of the concept or the mindset of just working behind the scenes, working hard, being able to deliver the key performance indicators or the KPIs ng ating Pangulo. Just like in any other division or company, you have goals, you have aims, objectives, and as long as you're able to deliver them without being seen, hindi na siguro importante yung makita ka, importante yung ginagawa mo sa likuran. Hindi naman lahat ng tao kailangan on-cam, di ba? So, ang ibang tao naman kailangan nandyan din sa director's booth, meron kang cameraman.
Behind the scenes.
Di ba? So,
behind the scenes.
Oh, behind the scenes nga. Yeah. So, behind the scenes. I guess that's one of the reasons why na tumagal tayo, because in spite of my background being on cam all the time, I understood the relevance of just being quiet and working behind.
So it worked, being quiet.
Diyan ko ina-attribute kasi kasi pag dalawa yung ginagawa mo, if you're working and being there in front of the camera and also managing behind, then you spread yourself thin, and it's difficult when you spread yourself thin. You'd have a difficult time judging your performance from a singular perspective, which gives you more focus on doing what you're tasked to do. But again, there's an antidote to that. If you have a good team behind you, if you have a good organization, then you can both be on cam and off cam.
Did you take over a good team from the previous administration?
Let us say that we have a different priority. So ang priority ng PCO under my term is to improve itong ating communication department, improve the ways that we create content, the ways that we spread content, improve ways on improve ways on adjusting or adapting to new technology. And that is is what we did.
You were able to adapt really brilliantly. You were able to adapt brilliantly to the new technologies and the way people communicate. That the social media of the government has become very effective. So how were you able to do all of this while also keeping up with the working with the president? I know that you work late hours, you attend cabinet meetings, and then you have to attend to all of this communication to be able to trickle down the message of Malacanang to the grassroots. Paano nagawa yun?
I think it's the acceptance of the fact that, number one, I'm a technocrat, I'm not a politician. And number two, having the right insights of what is needed to be done inside the PCO and the attached agencies. Now, there are three things. One is technology, the other one is administrative, and the third one is political. Now, as much as we were able to fix our digital presence or establish a digital presence of the presidential communication, we were also facing a different challenge, and this is the catching up in the broadcast industry. So it was a two-pronged strategy in developing and improving our platforms of communication. One was to build our television, our radio presence, and to build the Philippine Information Agency and the Bureau of Communication Services, the Philippine News Agency. At the same time, also to inject new technology so that we become more ubiquitous, in a sense that we are heard, we're seen, we're read all over. And again, and the other one is administrative, so it's about hiring, I guess, the right people to run the administrative area of the Presidential Communications Operations Office and the other attached agencies. And political. So, yung tatlo na magkakasama. So, it's about accepting the fact that it is not only about one medium of communication, say newspaper. Remember, the office used to be press secretary.
Yes.
And most of the secretaries that were appointed were either good columnists or people who run the newspaper.
Editors.
Yes. But si Presidente Digong understood that it is no longer just the press. You need to have someone who could probably run the television and the radio and understood social media. Siguro nagkataon lang, Chingbi, na I was there in the middle of the crossroads when the reel-to-reel analog shifted to digital, and digital shifted to yung mga MIDI drive, all of these changes, and a radio from analog radio to FM radio to digital radio and then to online. So na-experience ko lahat yan. You asked me to edit using a reel-to-reel, I can do that.
Okay, you were there when the president was campaigning, around this time, in 2015, 2016. And you were also working behind the scene.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what has changed, or is there any change at all from the president, from the time that you were working behind the scene when he was campaigning, and now that you're into the last few months of the term of the president?
He's still the same person, very humble, fatherly, very deliberate, and yung prati niya sinasabi sa mga kababayan natin na assertive in what he wants to happen in his government. Ang pinagbago lang dito, Chingbi, ay yung experience na pinagdaanan niya siguro as president, na he was able to deliver all of his promises. Yung experience na yun, and he was able to survive media crisis, was able to survive political crisis, was able to survive you know,
The
sort
pandemic.
of the pandemic. So yun ang nagbago sa kanya siguro yung experience lamang, and it only made him a better leader. Yeah, so siguro kung meron lang sigurong re-election sa Pilipinas, no, kung merong re-election tulad sa Amerika, I'm sure the president will win hands down a re-election.
Okay, you talk about that.
Yeah.
So maybe I can ask, he filed his candidacy for the senatorial slot. And then all of a sudden, nag-back out siya. So, what caused that change of heart?
Well, I think personally it's because Senator Bongo also withdrew his candidacy for president. And, you know, si Presidente Digong at si Senador Bongo ay parang kambal tuko yan.
Left and right.
Hindi mo sila mapaging Batman Robin, you know. One cannot survive without the other. Loyalty. The president is very, very loyal to Senator Bongo the same way that Senator Bongo is very loyal to the president. Ano? Parang talagang magkapatid na eh. So, palagay ko, dahil doon, umatras na rin siya.
So, I would like to ask you a question, but maybe after this break.
Okay.
Magandang araw mga katribo! Narito na ang mga makakasama nyo tuwing umaga sa programang Gising Na. Roy Pelevelo, Atty. Lia Badillo Crisostomo, Vernon Velasco, Kim Sancha at Chert Balagtas. Abangan ang programang Gising Na mula alas 8 hanggang alas 9 ng umaga sa Facebook page ng Daily Tribune.
Ilabas na ang mainit na kape at samahan kami sa inyong pag-almusal, mga katribo.
Simulan natin ang bawat umaga with good vibes sa mga informative and recreational segments ng aming programa.
Maaari niyo rin ibahagi sa amin ang inyong opinion via Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now sa YouTube. Makichika na rin sa latest showbiz happenings, mga katribo.
Kaya naman, magkita-kita po tayo mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, alas 8 hanggang alas 9 ng umaga at magsama-sama po tayo sa
Gising Na!
Welcome back, Secretary Andanara.
Thank you.
Let's talk about the major accomplishments of the president. He once mentioned that one of his greatest legacies was the revision of the water contract, and then also the peace and order. So, bakit yun among all of the accomplishments? You know, we can sit here and enumerate everything up to tomorrow and we won't still be, you know...
Peace and order.
Peace and order, yeah.
And yung water contract.
Water contract. Bakit yun? And why those two on top of all of these accomplishments that he
Kasi
has?
lahat naman kasi nung mga ginawa ni Presidente, including these two, yung water contract, pati itong sa Bangsamoro Organic Law, ay mga kababayan natin ang talagang may kinabang. The President always mentions that at the end of the day, we don't talk about our legacies. Because the legacies, what we do is for the people, at sa dulo ang mahalaga kung anong maganda sa nakararami, the greater majority. And hanggang, sabi niya, hanggang dyan na lang tayo. Pagkatapos, okay na tayo. Now, the Bangsamoro Organic Law was an act that was drawn basically before this administration at hindi pumasa dun sa nakarang administrasyon. Pero under his leadership, dahil sa kanyang political will at yung kanyang influence, ay naipasa itong Bangsamoro Organic Law. At meron na tayong kapayapaan dyan sa Muslim Mindanao. Meron na tayong Bangsamoro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. And hindi na naman yan pagdating sa kapayapaan. Nandyan din yung National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, kung saan more than 20,000 of rebels have already surrendered, bumalik na sa ating lipunan, sa ating gobyerno. at nakikipagtulungan na sa ating pamahalaan. And more than 40 rebel fronts ang dismantle. So, very successful yung peace and order project program ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, which is part of his promises, by the way, in 2016. Remember, that was peace and order, law and order, plus poverty alleviation. Now, going back to what you mentioned about the water concessionaire, I think it's also the same. It's about kung paano natin papangalagaan ang interest ng taong bayan, national interest. Now, it's so difficult to define national interest. If I ask you, Chingbi, your point of national interest could be different from mine or from your driver or sa security guard. Iba-iba eh. Or if you ask a bureaucrat, iba yung kanyang point of view of national interest, iba rin yung pag tinanong mo yung politiko.
Yes, but all of this have been accomplished under the Duterte administration. So how can he assure the public that when he leaves, this will be continued and will be pursued? So how is he going to assure the public that hindi ito yung Duterte administration lang, pag-alis niya, wala na, balik na naman lahat ng NPA, andyan na naman yung mga laboratories, you know, and then contracts are again revised, we don't have water again. So what did he put in place?
For the Bangsamoro Organic Law, obviously it's already a law. So hindi mo na siya mababago unless magkaroon ng isang pagtitipon sa Kongreso para magkaroon ng amendment or palitan o kung ano man gusto nilang gawin. Pagdating naman ito sa water concessionaire, ito sold already to a new owner. So yung usapan naman is sundin ng bagong may-ari kung ano yung nararapat, kung ano yung dapat sa mga kababayan natin Pilipino na sila ay hindi naman sila maisahan o malugi. Yung tamang-tama lang. Kung anong pangako ng water concessionaire, kung gagawa ka ng isang sewerage system, gagawa ka ng sewerage system. Kung magpipresyo ka ng tubig ng ganitong presyo, na hindi lugi ang mga kabayan, ganito ng presyo mo. So, yung mga yan ay napag-usapan ng bagong water concessionaire at ng ating gobyerno. What is the assurance na matutuloy lahat ng mga magandang proyekto ng pamahalaan? Kapag yan ay batas na, ay talagang itutuloy yan. Pero yung mga projects, halimbawa, yung mga pagpapatayo ng mga skyway, mga highway, mga kung anong mga bridges, matutuloy din yan kasi nasagaan naman yan.
But how about the insurgency?
Insurgency, the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict is already deeply rooted into the bureaucracy of the armed forces of the Philippines. At ang AFP naman natin ay very professional. At sila naman lahat ay gusto naman nila ay kapayapaan. Gusto nila matigil na itong insurgency. Look, we are facing two problems. You know, we're facing insurgency inside our country, and we are also guarding 7,600 islands in the Philippines. So talagang kung magkakaroon man ng giyera sa labas, panlabas na giyera, meron din tayong giyera sa loob, napakahirap naman. So it's good that we solved already our challenges with MILF. At ngayon naman ay sa CPP-NPA marami nang sumurrender. At itong National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict ay isa sa mga successful na national task force ng ating pamahalaan.
Okay, one of the promises of the president was that he's going to ensure that there is peace and order. At ang nangyari nga is he pursued relentlessly his war on drugs. So, even those who are opposing the president, they're saying na talagang wala ng laboratories daw dito. Drugs have been practically eliminated except for those which are being imported.
2 weeks ago, merong nahuli. 10 billion, pero galing yun sa ibang bansa. Pero tama ka, yung mga local manufacturers ay na-dismantle na.
Gaano karaming laboratories ba na malalaki na dismantled during the term of the president?
I don't have the exact figure with me, but I can say that it's more than 70 billion pesos worth of drugs and yung mga gamit sa laboratorio ang nahuli ng ating pamahalaan. At hindi lang yun, kung ikukumpara mo nga nung nakarang administrasyon, talagang napakalayo talaga ng numbers. And if you look at the number of people who volunteered to be rehabilitated, nasa mga 1.2 million. At padami ng padami kasi yung PDEA nagbibigay din ng real numbers.
Yes, so yung drugs, yung mga laboratories, they were shuttered, tapos yung mga drugs na binibenta locally nawala na kasing source, and then of course, the issue now is the imported. Yung mga nasa rehab, can you give us an update? Yung mga nandun ba, talaga bang nag-rehab and they rejoined the society? Meron bang numbers tayo kung ilan yung nag-rehab na talagang naka-recover, or are we just in rehab and people are just there?
Well, apart from the 1.2 million na nagpa-rehab, meron ding numbers yung PDEA. I just don't have it with me right now, pero meron silang mga natapos na yung rehab, merong ongoing ang rehabilitation. At yan naman ay weekly na ni-report din ng PDEA. So I asked them to collate all of the reports para bago kami bumaba sa pwesto ay makabigay kami ng isang final na real numbers report. But then again, let's talk about, since napag-usapan na rin natin yung drugs, merong mga panawagan na imbestigahan ang ating pamahalaan. Pagdating dun sa mga drug-related issues, mga alleged human rights violations of the Duterte administration. At masabi ko naman na we are working closely with the United Nations. So we have reached out to the United Nations through our permanent mission sa Geneva, dun sa United Nations Tribunal, pagdating sa Human Rights Tribunal. At naglabas ng letter ang United Nations na hindi nakasulat na investigation.
What is it then?
But it is cooperation.
So it's no longer a worry for the president.
No, it's not a worry for the country itself, kasi hindi naman siya investigation, but it is already a cooperation between the Philippine government and the United Nations. And it goes without saying that they recognize the fact that we have a working justice system in our country. Na if we cooperate, if we work together, then we can answer some, if not all of your questions about the drug war in our country.
Yes, the president also said that I'm going to eradicate drugs in 6 months. So can you say now, towards the end of his term, that it's mission accomplished?
Hindi nangyari na 6 months, di ba inamin naman ng Presidente, dahil hindi niya alam na ganun ka-extensive yung drug problem sa ating bansa.
But is it mission accomplished already?
Relatively, yes, it's mission accomplished. When you have already interdicted or when you have captured those who are responsible for this, kung yung mga odiktat, kung sino-sino pa mga big fish na nahuli, mga Chinese drug lords ang nahuli at nabilanggo, kung di nabilanggo, namatay sa enkwentro, ibig sabihin yan ay successful. At titignan mo na lang dun sa pagbaba ng crime volume. Kasi malaking bahagi ng ating crime volume ay dulot ng droga. So, bumaba siya ng 64% yung crime volume sa buong Pilipinas. Ibig sabihin, ang mga kalye natin ay naibalik na natin sa ating mga kababayan. Nakakauwi na silang na matiwasay, na maayos, na hindi sila matakot na umuwi ng gabi. Lalo na ngayon, nabukas na ekonomiya, na hindi sila matakot na maisnatchan sila or masaksak o kung anong gawin sa kanila ng mga drug addict.
Yes, so it's still in relation to that. Who do you think is the biggest fish to fall? Drug fish to fall under that. But before you answer that, we'll take a short break.
Ako po ay kabahagi ng isang alyansa ng mga kandidato ngayong national elections na nananawagan po ng pagkakaisa. Ako po si Sara Duterte. Handa po akong magserbisyo sa ating bayan, hinihingi suporta ninyo para sa pagka-vice presidente ng ating bansa.
Be updated sa news and happenings katribu. Hatid ng Daily Tribune sa inyo ang mga balitang napapanahon sa loob at labas ng bansa. Kami na ang bahala sa paghahatid sa inyo ng mga latest and reliable news. We got you covered sa programang Tribune News on Q. Mapapanood mula umaga hanggang gabi, Lunes hanggang Biyernes sa Daily Tribune Facebook page at Tribune Now on YouTube. Ang Daily Tribune may digital shows na din. Dahil sa mas lumalaki at mas lumalakas nating tribu, handog sa inyo ng Daily Tribune ang mga programang magbibigay buhay araw-araw. Be informed at mag-good vibes tuwing umaga sa programang Gising Na. Be updated sa news and happenings sa Tribune News on Q. Mas kilalanin pa natin ang mga paborito nyong atleta sa programang The Athletes Tribune. Alamin ang latest entertainment sa programang What's Up. Ma-inspire sa mga kwentong hatid ng Perfect. Search lang ang Daily Tribune sa inyong Facebook at Tribune Now on YouTube. See you there mga katribu!
Welcome back to Straight Talk. We still have Secretary Andanar with us. And Mr. Secretary, before we took a break, we ask you, sino ang pinakamalaking isda na nag-fall under the campaign of the administration on the war on drugs?
Maraming malaking isda. Nandun yung Odicta, di ba? Namatay yun. Tapos yung Espinosa.
Sa Espinosa, yeah.
Tapos maraming mga Chinese na drug lords. Hindi ko mabanggit yung mga pangalan. Hindi ko alam yung mga pangalan. Mahaba pangalan. In other words, talagang naging istrikto si Presidente pagdating sa ating war on drugs. Hindi siya yung tinatarget ay mga pipitsuging mga poser.
Nagtitinda lang sa streets.
Hindi, talagang yung drug lord talaga. Yeah. Kaya nga nawala na nga yung mga manufacturers ng droga sa Pilipinas dahil nga nahuli na yung mga big fish.
Yeah. Alright. So let's move on to build. So lumalabas, we have a golden era of infrastructure because even those coming from abroad, they've really noticed the changes for the better of the country. Mabilis ang travel, wala halos traffic, kahit saan, merong public transport. So, kano ba yung total na proyekto na yan na ginastos for build?
Napakalaking halaga ng nagastos dyan. We're talking about 5% of our GDP on a yearly basis. So, tingnan nyo na lang kung anong GDP natin on a yearly basis, tapos i-multiply nyo by 5%, yun ang halaga ng ating build program ni Pangulong Duterte. Again, the BBB is the most ambitious and the biggest infrastructure program of the country. Sa lahat ng mga Pangulo, itong administrasyon ni Pangulong Duterte lamang ang gumagastos ng 5% of GDP. Yung iba ay nag-hover lang dun sa 2%. So, doon pala makikita mo na. Now, the 6.5 million to 7 million or 8 million jobs na nailika ng BBB ay isa sa mga dahilan kung bakit naging inclusive yung ating economy. Nag-trickle down hanggang sa baba. Dahil nagbibigay ng trabaho eh. Kaya nga yung ating 26% na poverty rating o incidence, bumaba ng 14% pre-pandemic because partly of this BBB na ginawa ng ating Pangulo. At marami pang mga proyekto, marami mga batas na talagang siniguro ni Presidente na maipasa.
With all of these projects, roads, bridges, ports, airports, at kung ano-ano pa, which one should be the one where the President should be remembered? Yung parang, pag naisip mo, si Digong yan.
Naku, napakadami, hindi ko nga maisa-isa. For example, itong subway project. This is the biggest subway, this is the first subway project
in the Philippines.
In the Philippines. Yes. At ang pangako ni Secretary Tugade ay merong isang portion doon na mabubuksan bago umexit si Pangulong Duterte. So I think that's one. Maraming mga proyekto na na sinimula nung nakarang administrasyon pero wala pa sa 3 or 5% yung nagawa at tinapos si Presidente. Halimbawa na lamang itong Bohol, Panglao International Airport. Itong sa Bicol International Airport. At marami pa mga connector roads sa NLEX, sa SLEX. The infrastructure program of this government has never been this good kung titignan mo yung history. But moving forward, dapat kasi ito mga build projects na mga ito, it should be there regardless of who is the one sitting as president. Kasi ito naman para sa lahat ng mga kababayan natin. Number 2, kasi naging issue na kay Pinoy naman nag-start yan,
Hindi dapat
kay
ituloy.
FBR naman. Hindi dapat ganun kasi the maturity of a bureaucracy and the maturity of a country is also measured by the continuity of the programs. The programs. Hindi naman pwedeng porque ito ginawa ni Pangulong Digong, yung susunod na manalong presidente hindi na itutuloy. Kasi bakit mo naman ipapasa sa GAA yan kung hindi naman maayos? Ba't naman bumasa in the first place sa Kongreso? Nagkaroon ng mga BICAM, nagkaroon ng...
Yeah, but Mr. Secretary, there is also a concern that yes, the build is really good for the country. It pushed us forward, pero meron din mga konting concern na the other infrastructure na tinayo might, be just an elephant sitting there.
Well, yan naman ay spekulasyon. Lahat ng project na ginagawa ng gobyerno, lalo na yung mga big ticket projects, ay pinag-aralan ng NEDA. Yung ating mga ekonomista dyan sa NEDA ay mga professional. Sila ay nandyan, hindi lang para magdesisyon lang ng ganun-ganun lang. In fact, tumatagal nga yung pag-implement ng proyekto dahil sa masusing pinag-aaralan ng NEDA itong lahat ng mga big ticket infrastructure o itong mga malaking projects tulad ng national ID. Ito mga ganun.
Yes.
Ito pinag-aaralan ng husto yan. Walang pinagkaiba yun doon sa JICA na pag umutang tayo sa Japan, pinag-aaralan ng husto bago implement. So, pag sinabi mong maging isang puting elefante.
Yeah, white elephant.
Ibig sabihin nun ay hindi siya napag-aral ng husto. And I would beg to disagree na magiging white elephant to malaking projects doon sapagkat yun nga, nandyan yung ating checks and balance natin Hindi lang sa NEDA, nandyan din yung Congress, ang Senado.
You were talking about the national ID. Matagal na rin kinakampanya yan and now it has been implemented under the administration, Duterte administration. So, what's the progress of this national ID?